When was the last time you saw a found footage film? If you're a horror fan, you're probably thinking of one right now. The better question is, when was the last time you liked a found footage film? Or, even more importantly, when was the last time you believed that a found footage film was real? The found footage genre is way past its heyday, but found footage films are still being released regularly, both by indie filmmakers and major horror studios. Despite that, it seems like the quality of the films within the style has stagnated. We are way past the era of being impressed by found footage films, and even further removed from the time when one could reasonably believe that the events portrayed on screen are non-fiction. But how did we get to this? How did a genre designed around the idea of replicating reality lose its realness? In case you're unfamiliar, found footage is a name given to a subgenre or style of filmmaking in which the goal is to portray the fictional events on screen as real. This style goes beyond the grounded and minimalist aesthetic present within a lot of indie darlings. In found footage, the footage the audience is viewing is presented as having been shot by one of the film's characters. The genre is especially popular within horror, where the added sense of realism is utilized to incite fear in the audience. The characters, and with them the camera, witness horrific events and capture them on film. In most cases, the characters don't survive to tell the tale themselves, which is where the subgenre's name comes in. The characters you're watching are already dead or missing. The only thing discovered of their adventure is the footage you yourself are watching. The found footage genre originated all the way back in 1980 with Cannibal Holocaust, directed by Ruggero Deodato. While the film does include clearly fictional elements, a large chunk of its runtime is presented as real footage captured by a lost documentary crew. From the very start of the genre, you can see the commitment to presenting fiction as reality shine true. Other than the obvious element of shooting fiction in the style of a documentary, Deodato employed several other strategies in order to make his fiction appear real. While the violence committed by and against the Amazon natives is largely fictional, all of the animal deaths within the film are real and committed by the film's actors. This choice was definitely pushing boundaries, but a thirst for controversy is not the only reason Deodato decided to go with this approach. The clearly real violence against animals serves as the film's build-up to violence against humans. And once the audience is accustomed to the violence presented on screen being real, they are prepped to believe that the human deaths are real too. The dedication to portraying reality extended past the film's shoot. Each of the lead actors' contracts included a clause prohibiting them from making public appearances 1 year following the film's release, with the goal of strengthening the idea that the footage is real and the cast truly has died. And it worked. Audiences across the world believed that Cannibal Holocaust was real snuff, and Deodato ended up being put up for murder charges due to the genuine concern that he killed his actors for a horror film. This might seem ridiculous when watching the film now, but nothing like this was ever done before. Without a frame of reference for the found footage filmmaking style, Deodato's insane commitment to realism made it easy to believe that the footage was indeed found by him, rather than created by him. Cannibal Holocaust is now regarded as a masterclass in creating a sense of realism, but it isn't what launched the found footage genre. Due to the highly controversial violence, both against animals and people, the film spent most of its early life banned across the globe and few got to see it legally. It took almost 2 decades for the genre to fully take off into the mainstream, with the creation of another film dead set on convincing you its fiction is reality. In 1999, a surprise hit was born when a previously unknown duo released The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project follows a group of students who venture out into the woods in order to film the Blair Witch, an infamous subject of local legends. The entire affair is shown through the footage captured by the trio. In similar fashion to Deodato, a commitment to realism persists. The footage on screen is genuinely captured by the actors themselves, not by a secret DP pretending to be one of the characters like in much of the later found footage films. The cast were only given a brief outline of what the events of the film would entail, as well as a route to follow through the forest. They spent 8 days trekking through the woods, constantly filming and never allowed to break character. The directors followed closely behind, always out of sight of the main cast. They would set up items for the cast to find without previously telling them about it. Many of the film's scares came by the actors' surprise, resulting in what we see on screen being genuine reactions of fear. The most famous one included the only sighting of the Blair Witch, which prompted a terrified reaction from the lead actress.
Oh my god, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?
But never made it into the actual film due to the camera being pointed at the ground as the actress ran away. None of the footage was reshot, even when obvious errors such as that were made. The directors favored an authentic performance and realistic camera movements, even if it meant that some of their favorite set pieces would not make it into the final film. Their approach, referred to by them as method directing, extended to the treatment of the cast. During the shoot, the amount of food they were given was never enough, and it lowered with each day shooting. They weren't allowed a good night's sleep, with the crew making noises around their tents constantly, and even tearing their tent down in the middle of the night at one point. The goal was to increase tensions between the actors and force them into the state of mind of their characters.
You are a fucking asshole! I'm sorry! You're a fucking asshole!
And the audiences bought the film's realistic tone. Following the film's release, family members of each actor received sympathy cards from fans, believing that the film's protagonists have genuinely died. The woods the film was shot in received tourists, who were convinced that they were walking on ground the trio of students actually went missing in. Now, there is some debate over whether Cannibal Holocaust is truly the first found footage film, as it does contain clearly fictional elements, and it didn't launch the found footage genre to nearly the same extent as Blair Witch. But the reason I brought up Cannibal Holocaust was not because I wanted to correct a technicality, or because I wanted to tell a few fun facts about the film. It was all about the difference in the presentation of the found footage between the two films. The found footage in Cannibal Holocaust is presented in a documentary style. While it is messy and feels spontaneous at times, it manages to contain some level of professionalism, being shot in much the same way as real documentary work. On the other hand, the Blair Witch Project abandons any semblance of professionalism in its shooting style, instead opting for a style designed to mimic home video footage shot by amateurs. A lot of the footage is out of focus, and the shaky camera work is often pointed away from the main source of fear. Both of these are based on the primary way audiences consumed non-fictional media at the time. In the 1980s, the primary method was documentaries, so in order to create a sense of realism, Cannibal Holocaust mimics documentaries. In 1999, the primary method were home videos captured by families, so Blair Witch creates realism by mimicking those. Found footage films don't mimic reality just by having one of the characters shoot the film you're watching. They do it by carefully presenting said footage in the format most accessible to the audiences viewing it. An idea that we will come back to. Unsurprisingly, the popularity of the Blair Witch Project resulted in an overnight boom of found footage films. Much of the 2000s and early 2010s was marked by an oversaturation of found footage content. This marks the point at which realism stops being the focus of found footage films. The original purpose of the genre, using the technique of found footage to convey horror through presenting it as reality, is abandoned. Found footage gets boiled down to its name only. Long gone are the days when found footage directors would opt to use starvation or animal mutilation to enhance the sense of realism. Found footage is now made by major studios, massive corporations who wouldn't risk advocating for this type of method directing. These films are created by crews of dozens, if not hundreds of people now. The result is more polished, but in this case that only makes the film stray further from the original purpose of the genre. A crew of 100 cannot imitate the intimacy felt in a film made by half a dozen people. Directing methods aside, this period also marks a shift in the content of these films. Cannibal Holocaust and Blair Witch are incredibly grounded films. The storyline of Cannibal Holocaust follows a crew lost in the Amazon who engages in violence against the Amazon natives. It is incredibly violent, but it is a plausible story. It is a story that has already happened with groups of explorers numerous times. Blair Witch, on the other hand, technically falls into the supernatural genre due to its main antagonist being the Blair Witch. But even her existence is left ambiguous to the audience. One of the most frequent criticisms of the Blair Witch Project is that almost nothing happens, as the most the audience gets about the Blair Witch are small clues that hardly prove her existence, let alone her supernatural origin. These stories work in found footage because they don't stray very far from the real world the audience is familiar with. They don't only stick to the medium its audience is familiar with, but also the content. The massive wave of found footage films that followed them don't abide by this formula. Wreck is explicitly a zombie movie, one which also features paranormal religious horror. Paranormal Activity is, well, paranormal. Its supernatural elements are shown explicitly enough to negate the level of realism required to do found footage well. VHS features a winged succubus, and Cloverfield an alien invasion. This isn't to imply that you cannot do supernatural found footage well. The mix of clearly fake stories with a realistic presentation can be really interesting, as long as the presentation manages to retain its realism. To give this wave of found footage some credit, they do present an evolution in the presentation of found footage. In line with the two films that started it all, new films popping up within the found footage genre did find ways of telling stories within mediums the audience is familiar with. Rec decides to present its found footage as a TV news broadcast, a medium that was commonplace in the age of cable. Paranormal Activity presents chunks of its narrative through security camera footage, a medium present in a lot of people's homes. Megan is Missing utilizes online content like Skype calls and YouTube videos to present sections of its narrative. And Lake Mungo doubles down on the documentary aesthetic started with Cannibal Holocaust, presenting its supernatural storyline in the form of a regular TV documentary. But what happens when both the presentation and the content of found footage fail to live up to its promise of fiction as reality? The mid to late 2010s is where the fall of found footage truly started. Now, in 2023, we have lost touch with the original premise so much that I would struggle to place it in the same genre as Cannibal Holocaust or Blair Witch as far as the filmmaking intent is concerned. As far as content goes, not much has changed since the initial boom. For the most part, it comprises of supernatural and over-the-top serial killer stories, both of which don't align with the genre's initial premise of fictionalized reality. However, I don't think that the lack of subtlety in the concepts explored is the sole reason found footage failed. In the end, it mainly comes down to the element that started the style: presentation. Modern-day found footage does not concern itself with representing reality. Yes, it includes shaky handheld camera work allegedly filmed by one of the film's characters, but it does not align with any form of non-fiction content people are familiar with nowadays. Shooting a found footage film on an aerial Alexa with thousands upon thousands of dollars of audio gear does make for a more polished viewing experience, which is what the studio execs want. What they fail to realize is that the draw of found footage is not polish, it is lack thereof. Reality isn't polished. An accurate representation of reality shouldn't be either. Think of the non-fictional representations of reality you encounter in your everyday life. In 2023, reality is presented through a phone camera, most often vertically. We live in an age where every single person is carrying a camera in their pocket at all times. Any unplanned event happening is going to be filmed on one of those. The average found footage film released today still uses the same style of cinematography popularized in Cannibal Holocaust or Blair Witch, missing the entire point behind the reason that style was used in the first place. Rather than following in their predecessors' footsteps by attempting to replicate the current reality, they copy the style directly. Real 2020's found footage looks like this, not like this. Found footage has stopped being about capturing reality and utilizing said reality to cause discomfort. It has become merely an aesthetic. It might seem easy to say that we should throw out the whole genre. It is so far past its heyday that the modern day entries lack all of the intention put behind the originals. But I don't think that's fair. Found footage is a fascinating genre to me. The idea of creating fiction so realistic that audiences are unable to distinguish it from non-fiction is not one that should be easily tossed aside. When done right, it can create a new level of immersion within an audience. One of the most effective ways of conveying the emotions you want the audiences to feel,
I wonder who the real cannibals are.
is through convincing them that what they are seeing on screen is actually happening. So, how do we fix it? I have created a set of 3 rules that I believe could start the new wave of found footage if done correctly. 1. For a film to create a sense of immersion as deep as found footage allows, filmmakers need to revert back to more grounded stories. This doesn't necessarily mean that the story has to be entirely realistic, but any mentions of the paranormal, supernatural, or alien has to include a level of plausible deniability that gets the audience to question their reality without breaking their immersion. 2. Found footage films created need to mimic non-fiction content familiar to the audiences at the time. TV documentaries and home video footage might make for an interesting aesthetic, but they do not convey reality. And 3. Something I haven't spoken about until now. The film needs to be released to an audience in the format that matches the film's visual presentation. This is the major immersion breaking point for the majority of found footage films, and the one that major studios struggle with the most. In 1980, documentary films were released in cinemas, so it made sense for Cannibal Holocaust to be released in cinemas. There was no point at which the audience's immersion was broken. Blair Witch was marketed as a student film project by a group of missing students, and it was released at film festivals. There was no point at which the audience's immersion was broken. But nowadays, even a film replicating current non-fiction content, if done by a large studio, would come out in cinemas or on streaming services. A film could follow the first 2 rules perfectly, but the concept of going onto Netflix to watch a film in the style of a YouTube video or a Twitch stream is immersion breaking in and of itself. For the final step to be achieved, the method of release has to match the mode of presentation. A film created in the style of a YouTube video needs to be released on YouTube. A film created in the style of TikToks needs to be released on TikTok. Only then is the last immersion breaking point removed. Modern ARGs are often aware of this rule, being typically released on video-based social media or even websites such as Twitter or Reddit. However, they typically break immersion by going against Rule 1 and opting for higher stakes stories that become disconnected from our reality and snap the audience's immersion. For a sense of reality to be retained and a new wave of found footage to be born, I believe that all 3 of these rules must be followed to the letter. Without allowing for any immersion-breaking elements, we would be able to circle back to the found footage films that replicate reality to the same extent as the classics that started the subgenre. Unfortunately, at the point of releasing this video, I am not aware of any films that manage to follow all 3. Will you be the first?